Welcome to another episode of Just One More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Kurt and Lacey.
Hello.
Hey.
You can find us online at justonemorefix.com or on Twitter at justonemorefix. If you like us, head over to iTunes or to Google Play and give us a rating and a comment. This is episode 9, and we're going to discuss mystery and investigative plots. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix. Well, welcome to Just One More Fix.
Hey, everybody.
3 quick announcements. One, we are officially on Stitcher, so if you guys are finding us on Stitcher, hello, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Stitcher.
Second announcement is the blog post thing is moving forward. Our first one should drop on Monday. That'll be Kurt. It's all set and ready to go, and then there will be another blog post dropping hopefully every Monday after that, so long as we can keep up with the release schedule. Lacey's still looking to find her ghostwriter.
Taking applications. PM me.
So yeah, the release schedule will be blog post on Monday, podcast on Wednesday, and review episode on Friday. And it seems to be working pretty well for us right now.
Oh, I've actually got a news item.
What's that?
I was listening to another podcast, although I'll never admit it. And apparently, Fear the Con is back, and it's going to be in late June this year. I don't know if they've confirmed the exact days, but I heard it's going to be like the 20-somethingth. Should be a good time if you're in the Midwest.
Yeah, as we are. So they're on Kickstarter. I'll link that one in the show notes just in case anybody's interested.
I have one. Thing. So there's an organization called Extra Life, which hopefully you all know about, but if you don't, you should check them out. They just got done with their national 24-hour Day of Game fundraiser on November 5th. They raised over $6 million, and all the proceeds go to the Children's Miracle Network, and it's around the nation, so wherever you're at, it supports that region's
right. So whatever
group.
Your local children's hospital, for us here in Indiana, almost always it goes to Riley, but whatever local or regional children's hospital you have, the funds go to there. It's sort of like the March of Dimes and people that pledge money.
Okay.
And for
like
the amount of time that you're going to game.
Relay for Life, but with gaming instead of walking.
I've got that.
So basically, I'm kind of sorry I forgot to mention it last week, but check out Extra Life on the web, and maybe throw them your support next year. Get your gaming group together now, and
start conditioning now.
Yeah, you can also do your own events, I believe. So we'll link them in the show notes. That's really cool. We signed up at Gen Con 2016 this year. It's the first time we heard about them, so it's pretty awesome. So yeah, check them out. Last announcement is I am finally not sick. I am not congested anymore, so hopefully, that's been good for us. I won't have to edit so many coughs out of the episode, so that makes me happy. Because I know
it makes me bored.
I do the editing, so that makes my life easier.
I'm kind of sad we don't get the deep telephone operator voice anymore.
Well, I'll just have to slow down how I talk. Right on. So I guess we'll just jump right into it. Another installment of our Zero to Play here. And in our last episode, we talked about marrying setting, scope, and plot together.
We had a really good argument about what scope was.
Yeah, that was entertaining. For those of you that don't know, we like to argue and discuss things, and it's all in good fun. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So
I got invited back, so it couldn't be too bad.
I think everybody is pretty familiar with writing your classic high adventure Dungeons and Dragons style plots.
That's the stab the bag of treasure to get the experience out of it. I
Yeah.
keep mixing that up, so I just want to make clear that I'm understanding.
So I think everybody's pretty familiar with those, and we referenced in the last episode the big list of RPG plots. So I'll link that again in case you guys missed it. It's actually pretty good. I think there's a lot of ways that you could use that in any game. But in looking at that, and they make the conceit on the website that most of those plots are written for adventure gaming, and which is fine. But it seems like there's a lot more games now that have come out that are more mystery investigation games. So I thought we might talk about specific concessions and things that you make, differences in writing plots for investigative and mystery games. First off, I think we should probably kind of define what an investigative game is, because there's a lot of times I feel like where there's a mystery to find out what you're going to do in the game, but the main part of the game is the adventure. The games that we're talking about are where the focus is on the investigation.
Now, there might be a bot. Now, let me just make sure I'm understanding. You're saying there might be a boss fight at the end,
right?
But that's not the point of the game. Is to get to the adventure,
right?
That's
the focus is the investigation.
Is the investigation,
right? Or the mystery, however you look at it. So games that do this, that have come out, or some have been out longer than others, but Call of Cthulhu is the one that really kind of first set it off, followed by Trail of Cthulhu, which is my personal favorite. Bubble Gumshoe just came out, which is a Hardy Boys Nancy Drew version of it.
I've not heard of that yet.
It looks really cool. We saw it at Gen Con. We didn't get back to the booth to get it, but it's that style of game. Okay. It's an investigative game, uses a modified version of the Gumshoe system, which is Trail of Cthulhu, but with the...
Could you, for the unenlightened, just give them a quick breakdown of what Gumshoe is, since we've mentioned it 3 times in a row?
So Gumshoe is just an investigative system where you spend points that you have in skills to get information. And we'll get into that, how that specifically works for investigation, because I think there's some mechanical things that concessions you have to make when making investigative plots.
Oh, yes.
Night's Black Agents is another one by Pelgrane Press that uses the uses the Gumshoe engine, and it is basically Jason Bourne meets vampires. So if you think of the Jason Bourne conspiracy, and you put
Treadstone,
if you put vampires in charge of Treadstone, that's what it is.
That's a bad day.
Yeah, we've got it downstairs. I actually have a
I'm going to need to see that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's very cool. So those are the ones that come to mind for me right away. Are there any that you guys can think of that we missed?
Orpheus.
Oh, Orpheus.
You may remember that game. And it's actually a really neat setting and a really neat.
I remember it because it's my favorite.
And see, here's the thing. She gets the flanking bonus because I'm coming at you too.
I'm hanging my head in shame as you can't see through the podcast.
Rightfully should.
Yeah. So Orpheus, which is one of my favorites, but I choose to blindly, put that aside. But that's okay.
It's all right.
Any other besides Orpheus? Thank you.
Not off the top of my head. The big thing that came to mind when you were talking about this topic is I've never used a specialized system for these investigative games. To be honest, I've always shoehorned a conventional.
Right.
What about Connex?
Oh, Conspiracy X is a good. I think Conspiracy X is one that kind of straddles both.
Well, and Delta Green obviously is Call of Cthulhu.
Yes, that's all in the same engine. So Conspiracy X is basically.
He just took his hat off in a rather cavalier manner and flung it to the floor.
So it is essentially the X-Files, and it kind of straddles both somewhere, between investigation and adventure gaming, I guess. Mm-hmm. It's kind of, on the border. I think that's the main ones that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, again, though, it's nice. To be perfectly honest, I'm not as familiar with the investigative ones because I'm so old.
But you've ran Call of Cthulhu for us and have done a pretty good job of it.
Oh yeah,
and that's
you're in Delta Green also.
I guess that's true. I guess when I'm thinking of the new ones, I'm thinking of Gumshoe and those, Fate almost type systems, which are very, very different.
Right. Yeah. So I guess that kind of lays out the system, because a lot of these systems make big changes structurally in how they run things to make sure that you're running an investigative focused game.
Okay.
Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit less. It's not quite to take because as we had discussed before the show, in the discussion before the show, we were talking about the whole, I don't want to say baggage that Dungeons and Dragons brought with it, but the certain set of expectations about what you're going to do and what kind of world that you live in.
Well, yeah,
I feel like mechanic-wise, the games, they set you up for an investigative style game because there's a certain amount of built-in influence that you buy at character creation. So for like your for your Connex, you're buying like certain spheres of influence within like government agencies and
interpersonal skills.
Then like with your Gumshoe system, you have a very large variety of academic and investigative skills and a much smaller focus on physical skills. They're there for sure, but to a smaller percentage. Than
but the focus is on the investigation and this interpersonal and the academic, knowledge-based stuff. Okay.
And Orpheus also. Yeah. There's a strong...
again, with the Orpheus.
Strong with resources that you buy up at the beginning that affect your influence on more of like a political, social level as opposed to
But even your combat stuff isn't really, most of it, not real-world combat. I mean, I think we may have had some physical altercations with the characters, but a lot of the action that takes place is on the other side. Right.
Well, the other thing is that it seems like mechanically a lot of these investigative games, the focus isn't on combat, but when the combat does happen, it seems to have a higher amount of lethality.
Well, because you're not expected to have as many of them.
Right. And I think the idea is to drive you away from that being your first answer. Yeah. Instead, you have to get the clues to make sure that you know who the bad guy is, instead of just saying, I think it's him. Let's just chop the experience out of them. You know, So, all right. So let's kind of define some what investigative or mystery gaming is, because I think there are some, when you think of in terms of movies, there are some movies that are mystery thrillers, right? And then there are some movies that have a mystery thriller component to them, but it's still more about the adventure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like the horror, I remember Seven comes to mind.
Seven is one that we mentioned where it's very clearly about the investigation. James Bond is one that we mentioned that is, while you do follow Bond along for his investigation of what's going on, but that is more adventure focused.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if you were going to make an argument as a mystery, I'm like,
No.
the guy with the razor-bladed hat that chops bars in half.
But I think some of the newer James Bond movies lean more heavily towards investigation than some of the older ones, for sure. Like the Skyfall had much more mystery built into it, I feel like, than some of the older.
It had some horror elements, too. That were
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
So other ones, though, that are...
Dick Tracy.
Oh, yeah. Well, The Clue.
Don't act like you don't love it.
I did
It's the watch. But
I liked it.
The Clue is one of the ones that comes out right away, which is an older movie. If you guys haven't seen it, it's not too bad. It's where the board, kind of like comes from the board game
We're
idea.
familiar with it.
Yeah. Well, I know you guys are, but a lot of...
Well, it's the one that had 3 alternate endings depending on where you were in the country.
Right.
Back in the days before YouTube, it actually was kind of interesting because you didn't know.
Right.
So if you haven't seen it, then I don't know how to help you, except otherwise go to Netflix now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, after the show. You don't want to go
Yeah.
right now.
So other ones is The Prestige, which is a good mystery kind of one. If you guys haven't seen, that's a great one.
The one with magicians. It's got Hugh Wolverine. Help me out.
Hugh Jackman?
Hugh Jackman and Edward Norton.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Now You See Me is a heist movie, but it's a group of magicians that are pulling off a heist, but there's some mystery elements to it.
It's a newer one. Woody Harrelson, Mark Ruffalo.
It's the second one is not as good, but the first one is very entertaining and very good.
Now, where would you put Ocean? Now, Ocean's 11 is definitely a caper movie.
That's a heist movie, but...
Is there? Would you say there's any kind of mystery in there? Because there is definitely some interpersonal.
I don't think because it's not so much about what they're pulling off, and you know the scheme ahead of time also. So they kind of walk you through how they do it, but it's much more about how it ensues during the process.
I think that's the key.
It is about the
There's
end.
no big reveal of the aha moment. You know what I mean?
Well, when they, no, it's definitely not mystery, but it has. I mean,
There's
obviously
there's
these
parts
don't
of it.
fit into. There's a giant like 3-dimensional Venn diagram going on here.
So, Mr. Holmes is one that I thought was very good. It's with Ian McKellen. It's on Netflix.
I have to admit, I'm an enormous Sherlock Holmes fan, and I haven't seen it yet. So this is
it's really good. So it's
good.
about him as an old man, and he's kind of.
He's losing his mental faculties, basically. It's the worst thing that can happen to a person like that. It's like the tragedy of Terry Pratchett having Alzheimer's. And it's the same sort of thing. He's got some form of dementia, basically, that's setting in, and he's trying to kind of unravel the last mystery that he was involved in to find out about.
And Ian McKellen is an amazing actor, obviously, so it's very good.
But it comes back down when you can't control, because as a writer, as a screenwriter, you can control all the elements.
Well, yeah, we're going to get into this. There's just more things to look at for how the mysteries are built and put together, I guess you might say, for inspiration. Well,
the first thing is you've got to hold things back. I mean, that's you can't just lay it all on the table for the players. I mean, when you're talking to the movies, they're not laying it all on the table for you. They're it's very personal,
right? So I think
normally
that kind of leads us into like conventions
any
of
good mystery
mysteries.
Books that you are coming to mind with then?
Besides your classic Sherlock Holmes.
I've been living the Lady of Ashes mysteries myself. I find them very fascinating because they have first of all a female.
What's the Harry Dresden, the Dresden File books? Some of them have some good mystery elements to them. I listened to I think the first 6, and then I kind of started to lose interest in it. But they have some good mystery elements to them with the supernatural going on.
I will be honest. I have not read a lot of mystery, especially stuff published after 1945.
I did enjoy John Grisham back in the day. And the Pelican Brief was
is that mystery
fantastic.
Well, no, I guess
it's like political mystery though. I mean, because there's definitely still those elements there, and trying to like kind of solve something and figure it out. It depends on which book you're looking at, but that was one of my favorites.
What about the Dan Brown books, Angels and Demons, Da Vinci Code? I read the first.
Yeah, those are. Oh God, that's practically. I don't even know why that didn't come to mind.
Yeah,
but
those are really good.
Those seem to be like made for that sort of thing.
I read those before the movies came out, and I was like, oh, these are great. I mean,
they have a more grand
fiction.
Scale too, with the whole conspiracy Illuminati thing worked in
National
there,
Treasure. Now that we're on to those, there you go. There's a interesting one.
All right, so I guess is there any other things that scream out as inspiration? Oh, the Brother Cadfael ones, but
Brother Cadfael mysteries were fantastic.
Those are great, especially if you want to do something that's more in an earlier time period. medieval.
But doesn't have tons of magic floating around and dragons. I mean, that's
right.
supposed to be set during the Civil War in the 12th century.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
actually, most of what we talked about have been not high fantasy sort of.
Right.
I don't know that I've ever seen something done with magic and dragons that
I don't think high fantasy lends itself towards mystery.
Slamming of genres there. That
when
you don't really
you can
see.
scry people, it kind of takes
crystal balls.
Yeah,
crystal balls tend to take the mystery all out of it, and the ability to be able to read people's minds and astral project and stuff is like, it's over there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's done.
So let's talk about some conventions of things that what makes a mystery a genre.
Mysterious?
Yeah. Well, no. What makes it?
What
makes
are
it
the
a
tropes
genre?
that are required for it to qualify as a mystery?
So I think clues obviously is the first thing, but like red herrings.
Well, no, I would almost say that you've got to have maybe I'm not even using the word right, but you got to have the MacGuffin. What is the thing, the setup that's going to be the conflict? Because in a lot of stories, the conflict is kill the dragon. The conflict is we need to stab the bags of experience for their treasure.
We should back up then from MacGuffin, because what you just said right there is exactly right. In that it's not about this big bad. It's more about it initially, anyway. It's about a case.
I mean, in Trail of Cthulhu, a lot of times.
Well, yeah,
it's
but there's
about the big bad.
But eventually. But the initial piece of it is that there's something that's happened.
Everything that's happening.
That's the reveal.
Right.
But initially, you're set on it because there was a murder or there's a missing something that you have to find out.
But you can't just have a murder. When I write my investigative things, the first thing that I do is I sit down and I go, okay, so there's a group of people. There's a conflict amongst these group of people or supernatural entities or something's going on. Something happens as a result, and then I trace the trail backwards. And so you've got to have, whether it's a murder, whether it's cultists trying to end the world, whether it's something as simple as somebody stole the thing from the museum.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm saying, like, when you write it, you start there. But when you start the players on the way, on their road to the plot, it's not because they know some dragon showed up and laid waste to the village. It's because there's some small thing that happened or doesn't add up, and they have to find out why.
Yeah.
They are, and I think that's the first thing that you have to keep in mind is how you set them in motion. Can
we call it the spark or something like that?
Yeah.
Whatever's going to spark you into action, because like when we did the when we did the head-to-head table thing, I want to say I had to find things for the investigators to do, but I had to set up everything to get ready for the spark. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the...
So a lot of investigative games, you start with people that are in a position to be investigating, I guess I should say. Mm-hmm. So, your police people, your FBI and Connex is pretty easy. You're playing X-Files type stuff. So what is that spark when the people that you're initiating the spark for are not...
Oh, I've got this one.
Cops or private eyes or something like that.
So 2 ways to do this, at least 2 ways that I do. And unfortunately, now I'm pulling back the curtain so you can see. I've got interrupt your life, take away something, or drop something into your lap that you cannot resist. Now, if you're part of like the Conspiracy X type FBI thing, I can give you a case file or a dossier. Right. But in order to get you to act, and of course everyone has to be on board, I either have to interrupt your life, take something away from you, or drop something in your lap which you cannot resist.
Right. And those are all classic mystery tropes.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly kind of like what we were talking about initially, is those classic plot cues. I guess you might call those almost, So
it also has to be something significant enough that it's going to continue to drive you to investigate to when it becomes a point where it may not otherwise be worth it for your character. So when you get to the point where my physical safety is in jeopardy, why do I continue to pursue this line of investigation? It has to be enough of an investment for my character to continue to push the investigation forward.
So one of the major tropes that's in a lot of investigative or mystery suspense thriller stuff is the hard-boiled investigator. And, which leads into the noir thing, which is great. But most gaming isn't 1-to-1. Mm-hmm. Most gaming is one GM with 2, 3, 4, 5 players. Well, that hard-boiled investigator doesn't exactly work in that situation. So I think there are some mystery tropes with the characters or the protagonists that I think you just automatically not throw them away, but make concessions to them to make sure that you can have a group of people around a table that are playing as investigators instead of one.
I think there are a lot of stereotype characters in any genre, the mystery one included. So you have your hard-boiled investigator. You also have your vulnerable female is pretty big in the mystery sense. You have that, classic, sexy, oh, please help me, but
femme fatale, is that the right word?
Well, no, that's the one that's the damsel.
I'm thinking more like the woman that walks into Dick Tracy's office at the end of her rope, smoking a cigarette, offering him this case to
that's the
what I'm talking
classic
about.
Offer you something you can't resist. That's just number 3.
Well, so then that plays very closely onto that noir investigative,
yeah, and you see
private eye thing.
Definitely.
One I like is group of friends who who may be involved, may not be, and the life interrupted moment where the supernatural gang shootout occurs right there. The stumbling gut shot guy comes over and puts something in your hand just before he goes and falls down. Even if you drop it and run, now you've had physical contact with it, and we can continue as a game master. I don't want to say to interrupt your life with it, but we can continue to use it. I mean, I love that one.
All right, so kind of we're touching on some player or character, types and that kind of stuff. So one thing that I think you have to make special consideration for when playing an investigative game is when characters are made, that you have to make sure your
party template?
No, not necessarily party template. It's more like skills. You have to make sure you have all your skills covered. Well, so you don't have to have, wizard, healer, thief, fighter. You have to have
demolitions, techie, strong arm. I mean, you've got to have somebody for every occasion.
But there's a lot, yes, but there's also a lot of, especially if you look at Trail of Cthulhu, there's a lot of academic skills.
Yeah,
to cover.
No, but that's what I mean. You're a researcher, you're whoever that's going to be. And if you're playing with Carrie, then you don't really need as much of a spark because all you have to do is show her anything shiny as a player. She'll go right for it. It's fantastic.
Right. So I think the way Trail of Cthulhu handles it is, depending on how many players you have in the game, dictates how many skills each player gets to spend on their character, to make sure that everybody has their expertise so that no one is getting their thunder stolen. And as a game master, when people are making characters up, I always try to make sure that they're not making them in a silo and that they're doing it by themselves, that they're sharing what skills they're buying, so that because if you lack the critical skills that you need.
And this is someplace as a GM where in a lot of games, I can modify, bad guys and that sort of stuff to meet what the players have made. But this is one of those situations where if I've gone through the hassle of coming up with this mystery thing, I mean, this is the one place where I am going to put it a little bit on rails in the sense that the big thing's already happened. You're following it up, or there's something that's occurring. So I'm going to say, hey, listen, you guys really need a medical expert here. Well, it's going to be important.
List out, you need somebody that understands art history. You need somebody that understands, epidemiology or toxicology or whatever. Like, there's nothing wrong with listing off in broad terms. These are some skills you guys need to make sure that you have access to make sure that you can get the appropriate clues.
Again, it's that planning ahead of time, that saying, okay, so this is the game. You can't... Okay, I shouldn't say you can't. You shouldn't sit down and go, I'm going to run a mystery game. I got the first 2 episodes planned out in my head. Go.
Right.
To me, this is one of the situations where you need to decide where this is going. Now, where they take it is something else.
You might even say it takes some pre-planning to make sure that you...
No, because pre-planning is what you're doing before you actually start planning.
But you have to...
It's the sitting on the couch.
You have to prepare and make sure that you have this mystery laid out, because this is, like you said, Kurt, this isn't something you can just sit down and ad-lib. It does take some preparation, which is also why, if you look, most of these style games have modules or mystery adventures that are already built and have everything laid out for you to just buy and run.
Yeah, and
because it does take a significant amount of research and that kind of stuff.
So when you're laying out this kind of plot, would you say it's safe to say that you start off thinking about your finale?
Yeah, I think so.
And then you backtrack your investigation from there. So you think about first how you want this plot to end.
When it comes to mystery, I more to the point for me, because I don't like to limit the world, the scope for it, of what's going to happen. That, well, the scope's going to be automatically limited because it's going to be the big bad is A. Okay? And I will reverse engineer that. The big bad is if you're police officers and you find a body incinerated at 5,000 degrees with nothing else touched around it, what happened to do that? What is the big bad that caused that? Why did it do it? And then I draw the whole chain of events that leads back, because it's like a Newton's cradle. That guy lets that thing swing. Boom, it comes through to the other side. What does it look like when it comes back through on the other side? And that's how I decide what clues you're going to find and who you could run into. There's a lot of times when you don't run into anybody. I mean, in certain lines of investigation, but
So when you're designing your plot then and you have your end in mind, how do you decide how many minor encounters you're going to have along the way? Is that based just on how long you want the game to run?
I think that's related to clues, because those minor encounters oftentimes are tied to information you have to get. So something to kind of draw this together to how investigative gaming kind of flows is, first, there's the spark, like you referred to, how you kind of defined it before. So that's what sets you in motion. Okay. Now, so there's something that's happened, and we have to get information. Once we get that information puts us in danger because we have more information. So then to get out of danger, we have to get more information, which puts us in more danger, and that kind of follows this cycle until you reach the climax.
And I think one of the dangers that some of the investigation games I ran early on fell into was the endless investigation. Mm-hmm. Okay, the pacing when you write these things out, action and adventure in a investigation game is more important than it is in an adventure game.
Well, so I think this is something I thought about in a lot of mystery novels or stories or movies. It is plot focused in that the focus is on the mystery, right? And in gaming, I think it needs to be character focused.
Yeah, how does this affect player characters,
right? So
how do they know?
Right. So like the when you as you run the game, the focus isn't on the mystery; it's on the characters and what they're doing to get themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, their interaction, how they plug into the mystery, the information they get, the clues they find, and the dangers that they get into because of that.
Okay, so when you're past the spark and you're in this danger zone that you're talking about right here, for me, one of the critical things that I have to put into it is a tangible, we're on the right track. Now, it can be, I don't know, a room full of severed heads. It can be a police chief who pulls you aside and says, listen, there's people who don't want you to know these things. You need to, within the first gaming session, you need to be able to tell the players they're either on the right track or they're totally off base. Now, I am not of the school of thought that says even if they're off the right track, you need to just realign everything so it matches up with what they've done. Absolutely not. If they're on the wrong track, let them fail. But when you're on the right track, you'll know.
But there's not necessarily.
What?
Because I think this is, and so I ran most of the Armitage Files game, and there were points in that where we ran it for six sessions, but where people were way off track and there was too much going on. There were too many clues that didn't lead to the same points. Mm-hmm. Things were getting mixed up. That's also a very big campaign. It's sort of at the Masks of Nyarlathotep, size of campaign. So it is very complicated. But I think that there's nothing wrong with being flexible with your plots. Now, obviously, if they're getting off track, you need to kind of reel them back in. But at the same time, if they get so far off track, then what's wrong with just shifting, being flexible with your clues and plots to say maybe they actually did come up with a better mystery, Well,
I mean, if it works for that, but at the same time, then there's no risk, there's no reward. I mean, in the sense that in a combat, if when you roll the dice you always hit, then it's not worth rolling the dice. If I'm investigating and no matter what I do, I'm always going to end up back on the track that leads me to the mystery.
You're right,
it doesn't
but at
matter.
the same time you're not, because the idea of gaming is to have fun, right?
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal, right?
Oh, yeah.
So is it fun if we spend 5 sessions, that's probably some extreme, but if we spend an entire session or a session and a half and we are so far off track that we're never going to figure it out, is that any fun?
No, but that's just the point. A good GM is not. I'm not going to let you stay for 4 hours off track in the sense that you're not going to know it. In 7 years, you've never gotten that far off track with me and not gone, wait a minute, I don't think this is going anywhere. And then reorientated by yourself. Yeah. I mean, it's not like it's happened once.
Okay, but I think you're making an assumption. Happened. What about for people that have never run investigative games before?
Okay, if you've never run an investigative game before, it would probably be helpful. Now, I understand if you can't, but it would probably be helpful to sit in and actually go on one and see, that's how it works. If you have to, what do you used to say? You see one, do one, teach one, right? Isn't that what you do? All right, so you got to see one done, okay? Right. Then do one, then show somebody else. If you can't do that, you almost kind of have to feel your way because the pacing thing is so important because they can get so dull.
But see,
I
pacing
it's kind of okay to combine you guys' two ideas in that you let them get off track and you don't necessarily bring them back. But think about some of your really good mystery movies where they follow that red herring and they follow the red herring all the way out to the conclusion, and then something happens where they realize, oh my God, this isn't my guy because something else went terribly wrong somewhere, and now we're back on track again. So you followed that through, but maybe you kind of sped that part up a little bit, and you reach your conclusion there and throw them a clue that says, oh, this wasn't where you were supposed to be headed, and now we're back on track.
I just think it's a careful...
But there's still a consequence to being off track in the first place, so it's not like there's no risk involved. So there's some sort of consequence, and maybe, you know, some other minor character
I just think
dies,
it's
or you
a delicate balance to strike,
well,
because I think you can very easily turn people off to the investigative game if you let them, because things can run away very quickly, very easily.
Well, yeah.
And I think that you can really turn people off to investigative gaming if they just go screaming off the edge, and you're like, oh, I never saw that one coming, because you probably didn't, right?
No, players' purpose in a game for a GM is to wreck your plot.
And especially when you're delivering clues and you're not telling them, like, you look at a set of 6 clues and you think, oh, this is just so simple.
And 6, by the way, is a wonderful number for clues. Sorry, I keep going.
Well, we'll talk about the 3 clue thing or whatever, but I think it's you have to go at it knowing that people are going to see connections that you never did, and that it's okay to be flexible in your clues and in your plot to say, well, maybe, you know, we may not be right on target, but we're not far off either.
So when you're designing your game, do you have extra clues at hand that you can throw out if needed, but not necessarily required?
Not even if needed. So there's this thing that you'll see a lot of places online that has this 3 clue rule. And that's something that you see very common, that if there's something that you need them to find out, you need to set out 3 clues. I don't think 3 is enough. I think you scatter 1,000 clues in there, and you know, maybe 1,000 is a little extreme, but you know, sometimes it's not.
Can you
not in the Armitage Files
in a more realistic fashion?
No. When we started to need to color code by type, and then it got down to subgenres, you know, I'd say 1,000 clues was pretty dead on.
But with the Armitage Files, though, there's a lot of moving pieces. That's not one mystery. That's several mysteries wrapped together.
Yeah,
and that was something.
So I'm sorry, because I love the game, but
it was really cool.
I really feel like they should have reined it in a little bit.
Well, I think that's part of the problem.
They wanted to include everything, and it was too much.
So I actually lost a sanity point by trying to make the connections.
Well, part of that is my fault, because it's in one book, and like where I come, the gaming that I had done previously, like the one book goes pretty quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, and I try. You know, I went too fast. You know, it really should have spread out more like the Masks of Nyarlathotep thing, where it goes across. That one book is an entire campaign, and it's just condensed down very well. I mean, it's a great product, but I think
it was fantastic.
I think that if you're going to do it, you have to really soak it in and really see some advices online about how you run it very slowly, so that each it's got documents you give out for those of you that don't know, and then each of those documents is essentially a mystery, and I just delivered them too quickly.
I would be willing to try the game again, but my initial impression is still like, if the actual, you know, Cthulhu mythos hopelessness is what you're aiming for, then spot on. But if a solvable investigative game is what you're after, then I am highly skeptical.
Well, at the same time, I think, this is why I think it's more on me than it is on the actual Armitage Files, is because other of their pre-made scenarios that come from Trail of Cthulhu, we've ran and played very successfully and had a great time with them.
And they were great.
Yeah. That's why I say I went way too fast. That was my mistake.
Got a little too excited, put the pedal all the way down. We're like, whoa, we can't hang on.
The props in it are so cool, and as you read it, you're like, wow, this is great.
And the props are neat, and for sure they did their homework, and that's very
so I guess
it was fantastic.
The lesson kind of got derailed, but the lesson in that is to make sure that if you're going to run a large mystery, to take your time.
Pacing.
Yeah, exactly. Getting back to the pacing.
There is such a thing as going too fast.
Right. So, along with this clue thing, do you agree? Do you think the 3 clue rule is just too simple? It's kind of...
Yeah. No, okay, so based on just some psychology stuff, that you can hold about 6 items in your short-term memory. So when you're around the table, I will realistically probably, because I've run a few mystery games now, probably never give you more than 6 clues. If you have 6 hard, and then I'm going to pull back the curtain, if you have 6 hard facts about the case, that's probably all you need. It is, in point of fact, probably all I'm going to give you at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So what about like 3 hard fact clues and then some other vague, maybe kind of things?
But we're talking about 2 different things. You're talking about 6 clues that point towards the conclusion. I'm talking about like to cast it. If you want to cast suspicion on a murder suspect, right? What a lot of there is this 3 clue rule that you put 3 individual clues that point towards that suspect. So a fingerprint, a murder weapon, and something else. I think sometimes that 3 is not enough, because you're operating off the premise that they're going to find all 3 of those things.
And I think it's artificial, and you forced it if they do. There needs to be multiple.
Right. So that's what I'm saying is I think 3 is a great number, but I think you should take it up higher. Maybe the 3 clue rule should be hope they find 3 clues that point towards this one thing, but you seed 6, 8 of them.
I try to keep in, like, for everybody that's important. Like, we've discussed before my propensity for creating stupidly detailed NPC files. If I'm doing a mystery game and there are people who are important, the more important they are to the plot, the more clue files they're going to have.
Right.
And you probably will have 6 about.
But I think that's why, honestly, for me, your forte in running games is for mystery investigation games, because that is one of those games where having stupidly detailed NPCs and clues and plot and stupidly detailed everything else lends itself very well to an investigative game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's one of those places where the devil is very much in the details.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to keep it consistent, but at the same time, okay, maybe I reduced it to absurdity a little bit before when I said just let them go off. I mean, it definitely branches out, and with because everybody has things, the NPCs in their lives, as you're building this plot, you've given them the spark, you've given them the hook, you've given them the initial danger, and then you've given them the reward for saying, aha, we are on the right track. This isn't just some random lunatic who did this. There's reason behind this madness. There's purpose behind this. Then leading on to the next set of mysteries, because and again, with that whole, and I do actually drive the scope up typically. Not much. It can go up.
Well, that's what makes it matter
as we go
because
up.
That's what that's rising action.
Yeah,
is not necessarily the scope doesn't necessarily have to increase, but the level of danger does.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So now you could use scope in that, like the scope gets bigger and that's what causes the danger, but it doesn't have to be. That what has to increase is the danger.
I like to increase it by one level. I don't like to ramp it up from personal to universal and existential in one game. It's one of those things where, like with the Armitage Files, the threat to the threat is ultimately to humanity,
right?
And so if it's
but that's a Lovecraftian thing almost all Lovecraftian mysteries
but you don't have to make every story, and that's what I loved about Delta Green.
You can run a superhero game that's like that too, though.
Yeah, that's what I loved about Delta Green is ultimately, at least the way I envisioned it and the way I would write those stories, is that they were personal stories about personal things, and they usually never involved the end of the world. It was always some sort of...
I mean, Conspiracy X is very much the same way too, and just like the X-Files show is, it might be important and impactful, but it doesn't mean it's world-breaking.
Yeah, no, and that's... If you fail this mission... I want to make sure that it doesn't destroy the world, because it really closes off and it takes away. It also, if the scope and the power and the danger isn't terrible, if your agents or your investigators fail this mission, they get to fail it and the world continues to spin. Mm-hmm. They get to have that as character development. We failed this investigation.
Right.
I mean, you can't make it like, oh, you failed it, you guys suck, no experience, move on. Mm-hmm. You've got to make it like an epic failure, a failure that allows another story to take place that may be even better. Now, it hasn't happened much because, to be honest, as we were having some constructive criticism, I don't let PCs die enough. Now that I know that, I'm definitely going to take steps to remedy that. But it needs to. You can't just dead end them, and I think that's the point you're both trying to make. So don't dead end them.
Along with dead ending, it kind of ties into that as well. To prevent that from happening, and this whole 3 clue or how many clues discussion, I also think that it kind of contradicts itself, but you have to do the KISS method where you keep it simple, stupid, because for every level or order of magnitude you increase the complexity or the conspiracy of the investigation, it makes it exponentially harder for the players to figure out what's going on. So you want to have some element of that, but I think that you have to be very careful to manage how much complexity you build into the investigation.
Yes, but no. Again, so it can be incredibly complex, but give them those clues so that when they look back now on the things that you've given them, if they're able to get a reveal and suddenly they see the computer file that listed all these suspicious people who never really were that much of a threat to them, they didn't think, they look back and go, oh my God, the mailman has been the hitman the whole time, and now every time that doorbell rings, you're going to be like,
but what you're talking about there, that's the aha moment. That's the climax.
That doesn't even have to be. I mean, yeah, but I mean, you can make it as complex as you need to be, but make sure you set up those people like the mailman ahead of time. You can't. I think it's retcon. You can't retcon that.
Right.
You want those clues to be there.
But that's because you're building towards that moment.
Yeah, you can surprise them. And again, this is where the stupid amount of detail and planning comes in. But yes, you're absolutely right. It is. Some of the mistakes I made early on in my early 20s when I was trying to build these kinds of games, you see the connections as the game master. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what I failed spectacularly the first time I tried to do one of these. I mean, it was a train wreck. People got frustrated. We didn't have phones to get on in those days, but they got up and started getting nachos.
Right.
It was like, okay, let's stop this and go like stab some bags of experience for their treasure. And so that's my new favorite saying now. By the way. And so I learned how to do it. And with a friend of mine upstate named Scott, we actually did a Brother Cadfile style mystery, one-on-one hard-boiled detective thing. And it ran for 6 months or something like that. We ran that campaign and it was fantastic. But that was that crucible in which I kind of learned how to avoid some of the worst. Pacing. If you don't take anything else away from this episode, pacing. Keep the action moving.
Well, the other thing is the way mysteries are structured is very simple.
How so?
Spark sets in motion.
Clue.
Danger. Clue. Danger. Clue. Climax. It's structurally it's very straightforward and simple.
And sometimes end of the world.
Yeah, but I'm like, now that doesn't mean the game is simple, but just structurally how mysteries are put together, they follow a very, I don't want to say rigid, but a very specific.
Well, they're like romantic comedies. It's not a romantic comedy unless it hits these points, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly. For any trope, you have to, for any genre, you have to hit the specific tropes in order for it to qualify. But, okay, so when you're talking about, you're following the clues, obviously you want to have some things that are going to get your players off track or it's not really going to be any fun. So then when you have your red herring, how do you casually rein your players back in without dropping the whole thing?
Or I show them their spectacular failure. You think that you've got the lair of the bad guy, and you got your machine guns and your strike team ready, and you go busted into what you think is the compound of the bad guys, and there's a big sign on the wall that says, ha ha, and you look around, and it was kind of Joker-esque, possibly,
I was just gonna say,
but like
Batman and
55-gallon drums that say K1 kerosene wrapped in primacord. That tells you that you may have gone the wrong way, and that the bad guy has now trapped you. I'm giving you the adventure moment.
So what if you're not following the red herring? What if your players have just somehow gotten off track on their own in a somewhat less spectacular fashion? Do you still use the same principles? Like, do you create that abrupt dead end in order to bring them back in? Or
if they're on track?
No, if they're off track,
if they got off track.
They're not, they're not like following a red herring where you intended them to be off track.
Oh.
They've just sort of...
So generally what I do is I just have the clues. So they've got clues. And perhaps the clue was a red herring, or maybe they followed a clue to the wrong conclusion. I just have it like they're following a suspect, like Law and Order style, and they bring him in to question him or whatever. I just have them. The person doesn't have any more information to give them. Mm-hmm. They just don't. Which is something part we didn't touch on yet is how mechanically the way investigative games work is you have to build them so that they will always get the information they need. Trail of Cthulhu does this by spending points. You have so many points in art history or architecture or ancient history or whatever it is, and you spend those points to get information. You always get the information because there's nothing worse than failing a roll now I don't get any information, and now the game is over. There's no reason to keep going.
See, and there's another way to tackle this, which we'd never done using the homebrew system. You come in rolling your dice, or whatever it is, and instead of one roll for asking, it's hit points. Right. And as you take away from those mental hit points, you wear them down. Finally, if you can get them down to 0, they'll tell you what you need to know. So you got to have more than just a one roll.
Well, and if you are doing that kind of system, then you're, like you said, seeding more clues would be. So if you miss this one clue, there's still several others.
The other thing that you can do is if you're not using a system that is specifically designed like Trail of Cthulhu or some of these other ones where you just make expenditures to get the information, is you have them make a roll. So they're going to make their investigation roll. And success or failure just dictates how much extra information they get.
Yes.
So even if they fail, they get the initial clue. If they have a spectacular success, then they get the clue and a couple more details. But you're always guaranteed to give them at least the base amount of information that they need to be able to continue on in the investigation.
Then you can still move forward. But you're right.
But if it's at a critical point where if you don't get the certain information, certain clues that don't point you at all in the right direction, it just dead ends there and you're done because they can't just fabricate information.
No, but they can go somewhere else. The point being is I don't want to spoon feed everyone.
Well, no, it's not about spoon feeding. It's about the mystery is all about getting there. It's about the rising action to get there.
Yeah.
So as long like the game aspect of it is the putting of the clues together. That's the actual game.
Okay, I see that.
So if you give, I'm not saying you just spoon feed it and give it away to them, but there are certain critical clues that they have to move forward.
Okay.
So those are the ones that you have to make sure you give them, that they have access to get to. Now, the details and the more specific minutia, you don't necessarily have to give that to them. That's where you can be based off of how good they succeed or fail.
Okay.
All right, so I think we'll kind of reel this in and kind of sum it up. So basically, when you set this up, you actually have to do a decent amount of planning, or if you don't want to do the planning, then go buy one of the pre-made adventures for one of the investigative systems.
And read it all the way through first.
And understand, the plot points. And oftentimes I read them and I make specific notes about things that I have to, hit highlights and that kind of stuff. Make sure that when your characters are made, that one, they're making them as a group so that they are getting the appropriate skill sets and that kind of stuff.
They fit the story.
Yeah. The game should be player focused and not plot focused. It focuses on the characters and not the plot. Play your players' strengths and the character strengths. Make sure you keep that mystery structure in mind, where it's set in motion. Information leads to danger, which you get more information to get you out of danger, which then leads into more danger.
Danger.
That you have to manage that the pacing of that to where it's always rising. It's always a rising action to the goal is to get to the aha moment, where there's the big reveal and the players are like, oh, I should have known or whatever. Keep in mind that 3 clue rule, but maybe the 3 clue rule being that they get 3 clues that point to a thing, not just that you put 3 clues in there. Put as many clues as you need. Along with those clues and the plot, make sure you stay flexible with them so that you can mold or morph whatever you need to without breaking the entire thing, but to keep things headed in the right direction. So that's part of managing that pacing. To make sure that you don't make things so complicated that not even Dr. Holmes would be able to figure it out.
Mr. Holmes.
Mr. Holmes?
He's not Dr.
Okay,
Holmes.
well, whatever. Oh, it's Dr. Watson.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Oh my gosh.
I actually have never read a Sherlock Holmes book. Oh, burn me at the stake. So I guess that'll sum things up for us. So I think we might touch on some more specifics of investigative gaming as we go along, some of the finer points of it. But this is just sort of a broad overview of how to manage investigative plots and whatnot.
Yep.
So I guess that'll do it for us. So I think we'll see you guys next week.
All right. All right. All right.
Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can find us at justonemorefix.com and follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.